Good afternoon, Mayor Allen. It is 4 o'clock.
I think you're muted, Deputy Clerk.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you still.
Oh, the mayor
just a sec.
Actually, I can
Maybe
hear
my
her,
end.
Mayor Allen.
There we go. We're good.
Okay. It is 4 o'clock and you do have quorum on camera, so you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk, and welcome. Good afternoon, Council. Can I have a mover and seconder to call the meeting to order, please? Councillor Cabral, Deputy Mayor Colgan, at the special meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of October 6, 2021, come to order at 4 p.m. All those in favor? That is carried. Due to COVID, we're continuing to hold our council meetings via Zoom with staff and council tuning in electronically. You can watch the meeting live on the township's website at www.springwater.ca, or you can listen to the meeting live from a telephone by calling 647-558-0588 and using the ID 839-5354-4356 and then the pound sign. This is only available during the meeting. If you're unable to watch the live stream, you can review the meeting at your convenience by watching the video on the township's YouTube channel. Council, are there any disclosure of pecuniary interest for this meeting? Seeing none, we'll move into 3.1 of the agenda, which is service delivery review recommendations 8 and 9. And I'll turn it over to CEO Schmidt to start with making a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council, senior staff, and public who may be viewing online today. So today we continue our conversation surrounding MMP's final report on our service delivery review, and more specifically, we're focusing on recommendations 8 and 9 of their final report. The intent of today's special meeting is to bring a final resolution to recommendations 8 and 9. As you may recall, back in April of this year, council passed a resolution SC 182-2021, and within that resolution, the following direction was provided. The recommendations 8 and 9 be forwarded to a closed session of council for further discussion regarding the proposed organizational structure once recommendations 2, 4, and 5 have been dealt with. Further to this, on June 16th of this year, council through resolution SC 327-2021 confirmed this direction. On September 15th, we advanced our discussions in a closed session meeting regarding recommendations 8 and 9. And during those discussions, it was determined that a further conversation ought to occur in an open session with council. As such, we are here today to further advance that discussion with the aim of bringing a final resolution to this matter. I do have a presentation I would like to provide to council today, which speaks directly to recommendation 9. However, before we proceed with the presentation, I'd like to discuss and resolve recommendation 8. So you may recall recommendation 8 of the MNP final report states, and I quote, "Increase the township's organizational capacity to manage growth and expansion by increasing staffing," end quote. As noted on pages 3 and 4 of today's staff report, senior staff has provided a chart of the proposed new positions that we will be seeking over the next 5 to 6 years. The intent of this was to provide council and our residents with a roadmap of what is to come in the near future. Staff is not seeking council's approval of these positions today, as each of these positions will be required to be brought forward during the township's annual budget deliberation process for further discussion and debate. So again, no council approval is being sought at this point. Mr. Mayor, before I move to the presentation, maybe I'll just pause to see if there's any questions from members of council as it relates to recommendation 8.
Okay, before doing that, then, if we're going to have discussion at this point, I need a mover and seconder to get this on the floor, please. Councillor Ma Chapman and Councillor Moore. All right. Any questions at this point, council? Okay, I'm not seeing any cards, so proceed, CEO Schmidt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just move to share my screen here. Just let me know whether or not you can see my screen there.
Not yet. There we go.
Over there? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So today's presentation is being provided via a new software platform called Prezi. So unlike PowerPoint, which is somewhat of a static presentation format, Prezi is much more dynamic, and we thought it would be better to assist in showing council and our residents the proposed changes to our new organizational structure. There are a number of transitions throughout this presentation, and I will do my best to describe these as we go. As mentioned earlier, today's presentation is solely focused on recommendation 9. And so recommendation 9 of the MNP final report does state, again, quote, restructure the organization to ensure optimal span of control and realign departments, end quote. So with this in mind, the managed team feels that what we are proposing in today's presentation addresses both span of control and realigns our current departments into 4 service-based divisions. In addition, it does so in a cost-effective manner. So with that, let's get started. So Mr. Mayor and members of council, this slide provides for the township's organizational structure at the senior management level as of January of this year. And hopefully everybody can see that. This structure is based on a more functional framework whereby everything is organized around major activity groups. And under this structure, each department head is responsible for each of their departments and reporting directly to the CAO. For example, the director of finance is responsible solely for finance. And similarly, the director of planning is solely responsible for planning, et cetera, et cetera. The CAO under this structure has 11 direct reports, and for the better part of 2020 and 2021 actually had 13 direct reports. So if we transition, one of the first changes we undertook in the organizational structure was earlier this year when our former director of public works announced their upcoming retirement. In addition to this, we had yet to successfully fill our director of recreation, parks and facilities position. Hence, in consultation with council, we decided to merge these 2 director positions. Let me just show the transition here, Mr. Mayor, into the GM of Infrastructure and Operational Services position, hence reducing our staff complement by 1.
I see a card up, Councillor Cabral.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor Allen. I appreciate the opportunity. I do have a comment and maybe possibly a question with respect to this, what we're seeing right now. When I step back to when our director of Parks and Rec left, and we left that spot vacant, and then later on we ended up finding out that the director of Public Works was going to be leaving. Prior to that, I think that the idea, at least the idea that I had come out with the hiring of the general manager, was to alleviate the pressure on the CAO, and that the general manager would be the one that those other folks, these other directors, would have initially reported to. And that seems to have slowly morphed into something a little bit different. And I just wanted some clarity on that, because the initial aspect of the GM was that he would be the buffer between the CAO and the directors. And it seems to have been changing now and evolving. And I'm just wondering how we arrived at a situation where we have our general manager to alleviate some of the pressures on our CAO, and certainly he was stretched pretty thin. And my understanding was that at that time, directors would retain their portfolios, but they may have changed titles per se. And it seems to have changed again. So I just wanted to either find out a comment on that. That's my comment, because that's my past thoughts on it. I don't know if the rest of council remembers that that's the way I do, but that's how I remember it initially being proposed.
Okay, CAO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can get council's indulgence, I think as I go through the presentation, which is a couple of slides here, I think it'll answer some of the questions that Councillor Cabral has brought forward. And just further to that, the information that was provided in April of this year did provide for essentially what we're providing here today, with some slight changes, but nothing with respect to this general manager position. So, Mr. Mayor and members of council, this slide here, again, speaks to our general manager of infrastructure and operational services. And as we know, this position was recently hired, and our new GM of infrastructure and operational services is responsible for the following portfolio. So it includes infrastructure, roads and fleet, recreation, parks and facilities, and water and wastewater. And this portfolio provides outward-facing services to our residents and ensures that our infrastructure is maintained and improved. So, Mr. Mayor and members of council, I'm going to transition here. So hopefully, again, you'll see this, and it transitions back to the main screen here. So the next change that is to be implemented involves the creation of our corporate services division, led by a GM of corporate services, whereby the following departments as areas of responsibility are to be consolidated. So those being the communications and IT departments, as well as finance and clerks. And hopefully you're seeing those transitions and essentially creating the GM of corporate services. The GM of corporate services position is to be filled internally by our current director of finance, and this portfolio would be enhanced. So instead of just being responsible for finance, they would also be now responsible for clerks and bylaw, communications, IT, and of course, finance. And you'll see this on this next slide here. So again, this portfolio provides back office supports that are needed to operate the municipality. So again, I'll transition, Mr. Mayor, back to the main screen here, and will lead to the next change or the next transition, which involves the creation of a building and planning services division led by a GM of building and planning services. So again, seeing the transition here on the screen, we're looking at the GM of building and planning services. If we drill into that area, the GM of building and planning services, again, is to be filled internally by our current director of planning, and their portfolio would be enhanced to include responsibility for both building and planning services. So again, transition back to the main screen. And the next change that is being implemented involves the creation of a fire and emergency services division led by the GM of fire and emergency services. So again, transition, and you'll see the GM of fire and emergency services position on the screen. If we drill into that position, this GM position is to be filled internally by our current fire chief, and their portfolio would be responsible for administration, operations and training, emergency management, and fire prevention. So again, transitioning back to the main screen here. The next change involves our human resources department, whereby we've made a recent change to titles to better reflect the responsibilities of each position. So now known as people and talent, we have a manager that is responsible for health and safety, corporate learning, and employee relations. And we also have a manager responsible for talent, payroll, and benefits administration. And you can see that, Mr. Mayor and members of council, on the screen here now. So if I transition, Mr. Mayor and members of council, to table 1, on this slide, it provides for the financial implications of a new organizational structure. So if we look at the removal of both director positions, so the Recreation and Parks director position, as well as the Director of Public Works, you'll see that it provides for net savings in 2021 and 2022. And then we offset some of these savings by the new GM position, the GM of Infrastructure and Operational Services, that is. In addition, there are some slight bump ups for our current Director of Finance, Director of Planning, and Fire Chief to move them up to the GM level, and those are provided for in this table. In addition, we also have some cost savings in 2021 due to the gapping we've incurred as it relates to both our Chief Building Official and Manager Recreation, Parks, and Facilities positions. Although these positions were filled in an acting capacity for part of 2021, their home positions, those being Deputy CBO and Recreation and Special Events Coordinator, were not backfilled, hence generating some gapping or savings. In 2022, we anticipate there will be some further savings for these two positions due to the fact of where they land on the pay grid versus their former employees or the former employees who served in these positions. Overall, we anticipate net savings in 2021 to equate to approximately $281,000, and in 2022, a net savings of $148,000. Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to transition again. Oops, my apologies. Transition to this slide here, which essentially, council may recall that during our 2021 budget deliberations, staff had requested council's approval of a facility supervisor and a part-time administrative assistant position. Both of these positions have yet to be filled on a permanent basis, but are critical to the ongoing operation of the township. The township currently has no permanent full-time supervisor in the facility area of the business. We do have a park supervisor who is ultimately responsible for all of the township's parks, outdoor sports fields, and pavilions. And we also have a program supervisor that is responsible for all of the township's recreational programming, including programming at EDHS, as well as booking our outdoor sports fields, community halls, and pavilions. However, we don't have a supervisor to oversee all of our facilities, which includes the Elmville Arena, the food bank, administration center, fire stations, libraries, community halls, works yards, the Knox building, etc. This position has recently been filled on an interim basis. However, we still await council's approval on the permanency of this position. As for the part-time administrative assistant position, this position would provide administrative support to the Infrastructure and Operational Services Division, which is the largest and most outward-facing service area for the township and currently has no dedicated administrative support. Staff in this division are having to respond and complete administrative tasks that would be much more cost-effective to our taxpayers if they were performed by someone in an administrative role. Current staff are being taken away from their primary job responsibilities, hence creating delays in some of their projects. And there is mention of an example in the staff report regarding our asset management plan. So again, Mr. Mayor, I'll transition to the next slide here, which should be table 2 on, sorry, go back here. Here we go. So table 2 provides the financial implications to the township by moving both of these positions into permanent roles. We are able to utilize some of the savings from 2021, namely the $281,000 that was mentioned earlier. And if we take the prorated impact of these positions in 2021 of $36,000, the township could still expect to see net savings in 2021 of $253,000. Furthermore, in 2022, if we take the savings of $148,000 and add the annualized cost for these two positions in 2022, the township can expect to see the net savings of around $4,000. Again, Mr. Mayor, I'll transition back to the main screen here. In addition to,
if I may, CEO Councillor Hannah has his card up.
oh, sorry.
And good evening, everyone. CEO Schmidt, through the mayor to you, the facility supervisor, I think I saw the salary there, $144,000. What exactly would the role of that person be? Is that a caretaker role, or is that just to supervise the people who look after the buildings and do the caretaking?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hannah. So the $144,000, Councillor Hannah, is actually for both positions, for the part-time administrative position, as well as the facility supervisor position. So it's a combined total for the two. Further to your question on the facility supervisor position, again, the idea is that currently we do not have any supervisor in our complement that looks after our facilities. We do have a manager that oversees all the recreation, our parks and facilities, but we do not have a supervisor that specifically is called upon to assist in our facilities. And we have multiple facilities in our organization. That individual would essentially be responsible for overseeing the operation of those facilities and directing staff on a daily basis.
Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. The asset coordinator, would she not fill that role as a supervisor over the facilities? Because it fits right into her role. So I mean, why can't she oversee that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Ritchie, the asset management coordinator, Councillor Ritchie, is currently not a supervisor. That position is strictly for the implementation of our asset management plan, as well as for the software, the citywide software that we've purchased. That individual, to my knowledge, does not have the expertise required for this position.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we transition, Mr. Mayor, again here, if we take this,
sorry, before we just proceed, I see Councillor Cabral's card. Go ahead.
There we go. Thank you, Mary Ellen. Sorry about that. When you said go ahead, I thought you'd noticed my card when Councillor Ritchie put his up and was just getting back to me. With regards to the facilities person, I think we did get someone that was supposed to look after the physical of the facilities. I don't think that's the same thing that CAO Schmidt is talking about. We talk about a situation where we no longer have someone in place. Would it be fair to say that that's because the organizational structure is in flux? Because it would seem to me that we did have someone prior to that did look after the facilities. And I believe that was our general manager we had for Parks and Rec and the director of Parks, Recs and Facilities at the time. So can you just explain to me how this changes from that, where now we need an additional person specific to the facilities that we have?
CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Cabral. So Councillor Cabral, under the current or the old structure, we had a director of recreation, parks and facilities, and we had a manager of parks and facilities. Since then, obviously, we've merged the director position into the GM position, and that GM would oversee not just facilities, but would oversee a much larger portfolio, as I've indicated earlier. And so that individual is not going to be able to look after the day-to-day operations within the facility. The manager of parks and facilities, we have essentially merged that position where recreation, parks and facilities now falls under that position. And again, that individual oversees those three areas specifically. The idea is here is to have somebody specific, a supervisor specific to facilities to ensure that we have the bench strength in the organization to ensure that things are properly being addressed, health and safety matters are being addressed. Obviously, with the current situation that the township is entering, we need to ensure that we have somebody in that facility that can assist with the supervision of staff on a go-forward basis. Today, we do not have that. In the past, that individual's portfolio was just strictly parks and facilities. It's now encompassing a much bigger portfolio.
Thank you. Mayor Allen, quick follow-on.
Yes.
I'm looking at the logistics and the way things are unfolding here, and it would seem to me that we brought in a GM who assumed some of the role, and as a result of bringing in the GM, which was an additional staff member, really, and I could certainly understand the reason for it. Now we say that we're saving money on that end, but the reality is that we have to hire a new individual here because of that change. So I just question where we're getting the savings from. It looks good on the paper, but the reality is that that change also brings a new staff member on board. So I just having a bit of trouble with the math, I guess. Thank you.
CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Cabral. So Councillor Cabral, we actually removed a staff member. So we had two directors. We've replaced that with one GM. And so there are cost savings there. And as we've indicated through the 2021 budget and through other discussions through 2021, the facility supervisor position would be paid at a rate lower, and we still can incur additional savings. So essentially it's 2 for 2, if you will, but a much different pay scale.
As the previous numbers that you summarized reflected.
Correct.
Go ahead, CEO.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, just on this screen here, so the last thing I'll talk about here is just in addition to the positions that we've just discussed, the facility supervisor and the admin assistant part-time, staff is also proposing a new position of executive assistant to the mayor, council, and CAO. Under the current organizational structure, there is no dedicated administrative support for the mayor, council, and or the CAO. As most of you are aware, most private companies and or a significant number of municipalities, such as Barrie, Penetanguishene, Innisfil, Wasaga Beach, Utah, Tay, Ramera, and a number of others, typically have this type of position in their organization. The CAO is currently spending approximately 450 to 500 hours annually on tasks such as email management, scheduling of meetings, preparation of agendas, writing of letters, telephone inquiries, etc., that are more of an administrative function that could be more cost effective to our taxpayers if these tasks were assigned to an executive assistant. This position would be a point person for the mayor and council as it relates to any administrative tasks that they may require. Again, similar, writing letters, responding to inquiries, managing schedules, booking meetings, training, conferences, etc. This position could also be a catalyst for the Township Wellness Committee and the Township's Community Safety and Wellbeing Initiative, in which these responsibilities are currently placed on other team members, taking away time that could be better utilized for their main primary job responsibilities.
Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to CO Schmidt. I think we all recognize the CO is a pretty busy person, and I can see the need for an assistant. I'm just not clear what the role would be to assist me as a council, for example. My question to the CO would be, if I have a complaint that needs staff attention, and instead of sending my email on, for example, to the CAO, would I be sending it to the executive assistant? First question.
CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hannah. Depending on the significance of the complaint, the idea would be is that position could triage the inquiries, and to the extent that it could be forwarded on to another member of our senior management team to be addressed, as I may not be able to get to it in a timely fashion. That individual would be kind of the triage, if you will.
I think that's appropriate. I don't have a problem with that, because I always go through you when I have something that has to be done by a staff member, because as you know, council cannot direct staff. So I see that as a bonus, but I don't see much else that that person would be doing for me. And further clarification, is that position what one would refer to as possibly a secretarial position?
CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hannah. More administrative than secretarial, I guess. There would be added responsibilities that I would say that would make it more administrative than secretarial, if you will. So
again, I see that as something that's in need, but I question the salary at $80,000 for a position like that. I just not sure how we arrive at such a generous salary position.
CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hannah. So Councillor Hannah, again, keeping in mind that's full compensation. So there are benefits included within that $80,000. So it's not full salary, if you will. There is a benefit component to that as well.
I see Clerk Ainsworth has come on before I get to Councillor Cabral. Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you. I did want to clarify a few more pieces of information that might add to the conversation regarding support to members of council. So outside of COVID, there are a lot of events that within the clerk's department we help organize for council, various tree lighting ceremonies, parades, whatnot. These are also the types of functions that an assistant to council would be taking on. As I mentioned, we do take it on within the clerk's department, but unfortunately it's we have other duties regarding the committee coordinator position that would be better suited for them, where an assistant to council would really enhance that that planning aspect of all of the various events, the various correspondence that comes in for council and whatnot.
Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just comment on that. I know, and we've heard for a while, and I agree with CO Schmidt, and I did give this some consideration. And to be quite honest, based on what Clerk Ainsworth has just mentioned, that type of a role I see would be beneficial to the organization. I would, my preference would be, and I could support that if it was in that way, like helping council as a whole with organizing certain events and whatnot, and doing some of the background work, assisting the clerk's office per se with things that were outside of their normal daily routines, and certainly making themselves available to CAO Schmidt. I do not see an executive assistant necessarily interacting with council or individual members of council and being asked and tasked with different items like that, other than things that we needed to know from time to time. So I would like to see a distinction in that particular position if it were to go forward, where it was defined as specific duties for council as a whole, as opposed to individual members of council.
Okay. All right, CEO Schmidt, continue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this table here, you should be seeing table 3 on your screens here, does look at the financial implications of this position. So again, if we take the savings from table 2, which is the $253,000 from 2021, and we add the prorated impact in 2020 of in 2021, sorry, of $20,000, the township would still see a net savings of approximately $233,000. And then if we change over to 2022, this position is estimated to have a financial impact of approximately $80,000, which again includes salaries and benefits, so full compensation. However, if we carried forward the $233,000 savings from 2021, along with the $4,000 savings from remaining in 2022, the township would still see a net savings of approximately $156,000. So I will transition back here, Mr. Mayor, again to the main screen here. So this new corporate organizational structure does differ from our previous structure in that it reduces the number of direct reports to the CAO, hence improving the span of control. In addition, each of the new divisions are aligned based on specific program services. The advantages to this new structure is that it provides for better knowledge sharing, encourages horizontal integration and or consolidation of like services. It promotes strategic focus across the organization, and it does breaks down silos between functional groups and moves to a more collaborative structure. When considering the move to this new structure, the following was thought of: ensuring that we continue to strive to improve the way the township conducts its business, provide opportunities for increased job enrichment and satisfaction for staff, create a structure where departmental managers make more operational decisions and are held accountable for their actions, develop a culture where senior management team general managers become less operational and more strategic, create a collaborative model that reduces the number of barriers and increases communication throughout the corporation, ensures that a high standard of customer service continues to be provided in everything that we do, and finally, respect our financial responsibility to our taxpayers and the uncertain economic conditions that we're currently facing. I transition again here, Mr. Mayor, to this table here. So this table on this slide provides a summary of the number of permanent full-time staff under each department division for both the current and new structure. Under the current structure, the township has 74 permanent full-time staff, whereas under the new structure, there would be 75 permanent full-time staff, hence an increase in 1 permanent full-time position. I just transition again, Mr. Mayor. So before I hand it back,
Deputy Mayor Coughlin had her card up, please, CO.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Marilyn. And through you to CEO Schmidt, when I was looking at the position, the new position for the assistant, the EA assistant, a couple of years ago, I remember that there was a similar position within the corporation who did assist with our functions. And then when our fire admin left, that position was then transitioned over to fire services. Is that the same type of role that we're speaking of?
CO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm trying to recall that transition, to be honest with you. I think since then, Deputy Mayor Coughlin, we brought on a committee coordinator as we were bringing on more committees. So the tasks of that position that moved over to fire have kind of, I think as our clerk Ainsworth had indicated, a lot of those responsibilities have kind of been taken on by clerks and by others in the clerk's department, which to her point, this position would essentially take back those responsibilities. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Okay, CO, go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Mayor. So before I hand things back to you, Mr. Mayor, for questions, I just wanted to say that what's being proposed here today is a collective effort of the management team here at Springwater. This is not a decision of myself and or a few of us. All members of the management team have been involved in discussions surrounding this topic. Everyone, to my knowledge, is on board with moving forward with what's being proposed today. Each member of the management team is with us today on this call. And with that, I'm happy to pass things back to yourself, Mr. Mayor, and address any questions that you may have.
Okay, further questions, comments, council? Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through you to CAO Schmidt. I'm curious as to how the clerk and the clerk's department ended up under finance, and it wasn't a separate sort of entity among itself.
CAO Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Typically, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council Moore. Typically, Council Moore, when we consolidate or when organizations consolidate into a corporate services division, you'll typically see clerks, finance, IT, corporate communications, all consolidated under a corporate services division. Some of you may recall, back early when I started with the organization back in 2013, 2014, we actually did have a director of corporate services, and that individual just happened to be at the time the clerk as well. And that individual did have a portfolio that included clerks, bylaw, as well as communications and IT. They did not have finance underneath them at that time. So hopefully that addresses your question.
Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just on that particular comment, I was going to ask as well. I don't know how I feel about that, in the sense that the clerk's department, and our clerk in particular, is someone with actual legislative authority. And I kind of almost feel that really should be reporting or should be directly under between the GMs and the CAO, simply because of that legislative authority and some of the things that the clerk, her responsibilities entail, I think are outside the realm of these other silos, call them whatever you want. I think that, and I haven't had a chance to go online and see where the clerk fits in other organizational charts, but my feeling is that the clerk's department should be a separate entity unto itself, merely because of the types of legislative authorities that the clerk's department has, and some of the things that the clerk's department is specifically responsible for. So I just wanted to speak to that. The other thing is, when we were talking earlier on about assistance to some of the GMs and whatnot, so that they didn't have to necessarily respond directly to calls. Although in theory that sounds wonderful, and then again, we're talking about communication. And when you've got to go through 3 or 4 people, and you're passing the message to one person who passes the message to somebody else, as CAO Schmidt used the term triage, sometimes that takes longer, and sometimes things are lost in the translation. So it might be beneficial, but I also want to, understand myself that it also may make things more cumbersome at the same time. And a lean machine is an efficient machine, is what they say. The other thing, in respect of some of the questions that have been asked in the past when we started talking about changing titles. Why is director no good anymore? Why are we going to manager? Why are we going to general manager? I could kind of see when we were originally talking about the general manager, and we seem to have directors under that were going to then be called managers. So I guess my question is this: when we're looking at an organization such as ours, where now we have managers, this organizational chart really starts from management up. It really doesn't do too much for the boots on the ground folks that are basically doing the heavy lifting, I guess, for lack of a better term. So my question is this: the savings that are currently being presented to council are, I believe, based on what we're looking at, the snapshot today. I can tell you right now that the organizational chart for me, with holes that aren't filled, I can't support that. I could support an organizational chart that took the snapshot today and moved forward, but to have several holes in it for people to be placed in at a later date, I think that's better at budget time to be accomplished through program changes and background information that would support those program changes. This particular organizational chart, on paper, it looks pretty smooth, and I do think that staff put a lot of thought into it. And it's based on the recommendation from the consultant. And it was based on growth, but the snapshot is today. And when we're talking about the savings, and I take that snapshot and I take it again 6 months down the road, I don't think those savings are going to actually be realized. And the reason I say that is we're adding layers to the organization. We're going from managers to general managers to the CAO, and there has to be a differential between those particular functions based on responsibility. And that's where this comprehensive compensation review is coming in. And if we're taking the snapshot today, that comprehensive compensation review, I would say, would look different than it's going to look 6 months down the road, given we adopt this particular organizational structure at this meeting today. And that's assuming that all of council is in agreement that this is exactly the organizational structure that we need. And I'd like to know, does changing a title automatically entitle someone to additional compensation? I'd like to know what the differences are. And these are questions that have come up before that really have not been answered yet. So we have an organizational structure that we want to move forward with, but we really don't have any background information to show how useful it's going to be and how it's actually going to work. So I just want to be honest with council and with staff. I'm struggling with this right now for many reasons that are on the periphery.
Okay, CEO Schmidt, do you want to address some of those points?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Cabral. So there's a number of comments there, so I'll do my best to.
I apologize.
No, that's fine. So with respect to, I think your first comment, Councillor Cabral, relates to the clerks, and you know, I'll make my statement, and then I could pass it off to Clerk Ainsworth, and she could definitely provide her input. But there are a number of organizations, municipalities, whereby the clerk does not report directly to the CAO, and clerk's department in general do not report directly to the CAO. You don't have to look very far, actually. I can show you what Tay Township does, and their clerk does not report directly to the CAO based on the organizational structure. And so maybe I'll pause there, and Clerk Ainsworth, you could provide any comments on that matter.
Ainsworth?
Thank you, through the mayor. So yes, CEO Schmidt is correct. There are quite a few examples out there where the clerk's department reports directly through to a corporate services or legislative services department and not directly to the CAO. Just for council's information, I am fully in support of this organizational structure. As the clerk, I was highly involved in the drafting of this, multiple meetings on the topic with myself, as well as all of the rest of senior staff. As far as legislative or, legislative authority, where the clerk sits on the organizational structure does not change any of the legislative authority. Nobody can override that. It's part of the Municipal Act, the Planning Act, various other pieces of legislation that whatever the title, as long as the appointment of clerk is there, wherever it sits on the organizational structure, all of that authority remains with the clerk unless the appointment is rescinded by council. So I just wanted to also make that very clear that this would not affect the way the clerk does their job, what they're entitled to do with authorization, various legislation.
CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just, I guess, a couple other comments. I guess there was a comment about GM versus director. So essentially, I think as indicated in the staff report, what we're doing here is essentially adding, if you will, 4 GMs, but in the same time removing the director level. So essentially, we do not have any directors in the organizational structure. And we've been able to do that through, as I mentioned, the Director of Public Works retiring, as well as not filling the Director of Recreation, Parks and Facilities when we went out and just recruited for our CBO. That was not at a director level. And our clerk, although is at the senior management team, she does not hold the title of director. So essentially, you are looking at 4 GMs versus a 7 director level, which we previously had. I guess the other comment I made with regards to GM versus director is that a GM has an enhanced portfolio. They have much more responsibility underneath them. For example, finance, instead of the director of finance simply having finance under them, they will now be responsible for the corporate services division, which would include communications, IT, clerks and bylaw, as well as finance. And that's just one example. So each one of those GMs would be having more added to their portfolio. And to answer the question on the comp review, I don't have the exact numbers because they haven't been finalized, but I don't anticipate, based on what I provided for in the table already, a significant increase over what's already been provided in table 1 this evening or this afternoon.
Councillor Hannah, then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. And, I'm going to have a couple of minutes here, so I apologize. It seems like I'm running on. Firstly, let me say that I think the organizational chart looks pretty good, looks manageable. It's not inconsistent with what happens in police departments, fire departments. Even if you look at the premier, he has ministers under him or her that look after and have different responsibilities. I think what makes it a success is the people that are in those positions and also the leader. So hopefully that if this goes forward, we'll have good people in position. I have 2 concerns. One, again, as Councillor Cabell touched on, the future costs, impacts. We understand right now from the savings that we have in surplus that for this year and next year, it will be a cost savings, but going forward, as Councillor Cabell pointed out, the people that are moving up in the ladder, if you like, to higher positions, there's going to, I believe as well, are going to generate some salary increases that are going to affect our taxpayers. However, it may be worth it if the efficiencies are successful. The other issue I have is with the timing. We're still waiting for the service delivery report to come forward. What recommendations are coming from that? And another interesting thing on page 30, where is it here? Page 37 or slide 6 on the presentation that we received from the CAO. On the bottom of it, it says it is important. This is from our consultant, MNP. It says it is important to note that the organizational structure presented above will require further review and analysis before it can be adopted and implemented. It is recommended the township complete fulsome organizational review to develop and determine future state of and structure. I think that the CAO is going to suggest that that's what he and staff have done. But again, I'm pointing out that we're still waiting for the response or the results of our service delivery review. So I just need clarification on what's going forward here tonight to make certain that we're not approving this as we have received it for tonight. We're just accepting it and it'll be finalized and approved once the service delivery is completed and also once we're finished or during the negotiations of our 2022 budget.
Theo Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there is a staff report on this evening's or this afternoon's agenda, which essentially is seeking approval of the new organizational structure and for it to be implemented as of January 1st, 2022.
So my response, if I may, is then that we are approving it, even though we haven't received the service delivery report.
Theo.
Mr. Mayor, or through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hannah, based on the staff report this afternoon, yes, it would be, we're seeking approval today. to be effective January 1st.
Okay, Councillor Moore, then, oh, I see Director Radigan. Go ahead, Director Radigan.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and through you to Councillor Hannah. I just wanted to clarify that the service delivery review that's currently taking place, the majority of it is focusing on activity worksheets, and we have had discussions with the successful proponent, and we will be coming forward hopefully with a draft in November to discuss their findings. But other than that, the other portion is to determine KPIs and service standards. So it will not necessarily touch on the organizational structure, simply because that was the direction provided by council to further review recommendations 2, 4, and 5. So this is specific to recommendation 8 and 9, which the service delivery review is not further looking into. I just wanted to provide that clarification.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So I want to clarify, though, that the activity reports are due to come out, I think, end of January, we're hoping, or early February. And they would be addressing the KPIs for sure. But I think the challenge we're having is if there are program changes brought forward, council really wanted data or those activity reports to enable decision-making. So I think that's what we're seeing. And if I'm interpreting what Councillor Hannah has said, they can't really move forward with this organizational structure without understanding some of that case study, we'll call it.
Any further, Director
sorry.
Radigan? Sorry, did you have another point, Councillor Moore?
Sorry, I was just adding that on. My original point was, when I look at the organizational chart, I see the new general manager positions, and I see the manager positions that were directors but are now managers. What I'm wanting to know if the new manager position, just by virtue of changing name from director to manager, are they seeing an increase in their compensation for that?
C.L. Schmidt.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Moore. So Councillor Moore, based on table 1 that was presented this afternoon, there is a slight bump up that's being indicated in that table for those 3 positions. And again, the intent is you're moving from a director level where you had responsibility for one department versus now you're a general manager with much more enhanced portfolio and responsibilities. Sorry,
Mayor Allen, if I could follow on CAO, what I'm not speaking about the general manager position, I'm speaking about, say, the manager of roads and fleet. Are they receiving a bump up in pay just by sheer change of title? I don't know that he's seeing an increase in responsibility, that's all.
Dale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Councillor Moore. That individual, when they took on the position from manager, because they moved from a lower level position to the manager level, they would have received an increase, just simply the fact that they moving from a lower level position to a manager, but not through this corp reorg. They're not receiving a further bump up. No.
Okay, Councillor Cabral, then I believe, well, actually, we haven't heard from Councillor Mott Chapman, and she has her card up. Go ahead, Councillor Mott Chapman.
Hi, Alan. I totally support this restructure. I think it's less top heavy because lots of organizations get into too top heavy, and it alleviates the work on the CEO. I understand with the compensation review, the only difference is basically changing the title, and we're only looking at one full time. I don't know if it's going to totally change the compensation review that much. I just want to know I'm in support of this, and it's got a lot of hard work. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cabral and Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through you, I just want to step back. I have to apologize, actually, because it's involving the service delivery review. I have to take a different position, however, from what was said earlier, I think the service delivery review speaks to the whole organization, because the service delivery review, based on what we get back from that, is an indicator of how well every aspect of this organization is doing. So to be quite honest, I think it's important for us to actually have that information, because that information will help provide us look at where we are lacking and where we need to put the resources. So this organizational chart fits with the service delivery review. It's not a part of the service delivery review. And although it does relate specifically to a couple of other recommendations, I think it also does reflect on the 8 and 9 that we're speaking about today, because that service delivery review is a snapshot of what our organization is doing today. And really, we should be basing what this organization is going to do on the results of the service delivery review, because it's going to tell us where we're strong and where we're weak. Right now, we're putting things in place, and where, you know, everybody thinks that's the way it should be and that's where it should go. And I get that. But the service delivery review, that type of data that we were seeking and looking for, is what is going to help guide us going forward. So I hope folks understand why this is a struggle. Certainly for me, I don't know about other members of council. I'm not opposed to an organizational change. I just would really like to make sure, on behalf of everybody that I represent, that that organizational change is made in the best interests of the township and the residents who reside in the township. And there's a few things that dovetail together here, but they seem to be apart right now.
Director Radigan?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through you to Councillor Cabral. I certainly agree with your comments and your concerns. The activity worksheets will absolutely help support recommendation 8. And those are the positions that will be coming forward as program changes for council's consideration as part of the 2022 budget process. Those program changes will have justification behind them, but they will also have the activity worksheets to support the need for those additional positions, more for a right sizing of the organization, which CAO Schmidt has mentioned in the past. Recommendation 9, however, it is not necessarily tied to the activity worksheets. We're more approaching it as an organizational a change, but the activity worksheets won't identify that at an organizational level. It'll identify it in terms of individuals' current roles and responsibilities and capacity, but it also identified the resources that we will need to move forward as part of the 2022 budget process. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you, Marilyn, and through you to CEO Schmidt. If it would be possible to pull back up the slide that shows the cost savings indicated. The reason for this is that Councillor Hanna touched on a point that I myself had been curious of. While the base budget, and I know we don't like the word base budget, but the base budget for the last 2 years has shown a cost savings, and that cost savings is now being preserved to be allocated towards these changes. My question would be, if we were to have had the positions as current, that of, I don't know, we're allowed to use names, but understanding our directors that have since retired or that have been amalgamated, if we were to go back to 2019 and the cost, our salaries, everything, benefits, everything all in for the 74 employees, the base budget of that cost. And then as we're looking forward to 2022, I understand that we're applying a cost savings to alleviate the new change. However, in 2023, that's all going to become part of our base budget, which we typically don't see, or it's not highlighted for residents if it's not a program change. So my question then, I guess, is moving from the original 74 employees to the original, or to the new 75 employees, without incorporating the cost savings of the vacancies, what would the comparison be between, for example, how we were operating in 2019 And with these new changes, how would we be operating in 2023?
Start with CEO Schmidt on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the Deputy Mayor. Not sure, Deputy Mayor, I have all of that information available right now. I guess ultimately, again, we're looking at, through this change, this organizational change, we're looking at simply an addition of one permanent full-time position. And that permanent full-time position essentially being the EA, which we've indicated would be roughly an $80,000 impact. What that's going to look like in 2023, there's many implications that are going to potentially happen between now and 2023. I don't have a crystal ball that's going to tell me what that's going to be. Obviously, there's going to be increases, or there could be increases in many different areas of the organization, cost-wise. But there also could be savings. Through the IT master plan that's coming out, there may be identified savings through that, but there may also be requirements to invest in further software to assist the organization, and that may have an impact on what we plan for 2022 and years out. So some of those positions that I indicated in recommendation 8, they could be impacted, but I will indicate too that just because you implement, I'll call it artificial intelligence and or software, doesn't mean that it replaces staff. It means that the jobs change, but it may mean that a different type of position may be needed in order to further the corporation. So I'm not suggesting that it ultimately would lead to a reduction in staff. It may in some areas, but we may have to pick up in other areas just due to the fact of how the software is implemented. So not sure that actually answers your question, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Follow on, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. The intention of the question was simply to just alleviate, I guess, concerns in that we're seeing the cost savings being presented to us. And while I understand that in this budget session there would be, the question would then be how does that roll over as a base budget for years to come? I think that when I'm listening to other members of council speak about the background information that they're required, I often find myself frustrated during budget process because I feel that this today is our session for background information so that we can make an informed decision in a month's time when we're looking towards the budget. So I just want to ensure that whether that's a follow-up from this meeting to ensure that when we are making decisions during budget process that we are able to move forward, because I do support this corporate reorg. I think that it's welcomed. I think that it's needed. I think that we've had many consultants over the past 7 years, at least for myself, indicate how lean we are. And I do agree with Councillor Cabral in that a lean machine is the way to go. But sometimes we're outgrowing the corporation that we have now. And I think that it's very important that we start to put in place a corporate structure that is going to move us forward. I have heard from residents recently, we have that restructuring in bylaw, we've had the restoring in building, and we are in a customer service industry. That's essentially what we do. We provide service to customers. Those customers are our residents, and we need to ensure that the efficiencies are there. And I think that this corporate reorganization does provide us with the opportunity through our SDR and the KPIs that it's going to identify to provide that to our residents. And I think that these positions are the first step in better outfitting our corporation.
Thank you. I too support this organization, as we've been hearing and seeing the workload on the CAO has been unreasonably heavy and has precluded his ability to spend time focusing on strategic planning and coming up with new ideas to help increase efficiencies. It's been putting out fires because he's been handling multiple responsibilities. This new organization, as we see, is not unique. It mirrors to a large extent corporate organizations and other municipal organizations where you have the proper funneling of silos into a CAO's position. We are able to have savings because of this year's numbers and next year's numbers. Growth will enable the other considerations of the positions that are set out in the report in the next 3, 4, 5 years, depending on the extent of that growth and the needs. So I'm fully supportive of this, and the fact that staff has spent so much time, senior staff has spent so much time discussing this and agreeing, having input into it, and agreeing that this is the most efficient. I think this is the best way for us to move forward and constructively handle the growth that we are and will continue to experience. So I definitely support this. Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I do support the organizational restructure. I do. But I am going to ask for an indulgence, and that we please put this off until after budget. I really think I need to get a really good sense of what the tax implications are going to be to our residents this year. I think that's I'm anticipating a tax increase, and I need to understand what that's going to look like. I also need to see the program changes come forward, and I guess these positions in yellow will be on that list, as well as the green positions. So I am just going to ask for that indulgence, and maybe relook at it in January.
So I'll get to the yellow cards. The CAO has indicated and shown us with numbers that the impact of these changes will not be, he's indicated what the financial impact will be this year and next year of these changes. So program changes would be in addition to what is being presented here. So I'm just, what will be clarified by the budget process with respect to this, Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I think one thing at a time. So I have to get through the budget myself and understand what the costs are going to look like for next year. And I understand that there's savings potentially for this year and possibly next year, but every budget has short and long-term implications. And so I need to understand better what next year and the year after will look like. So I'm not asking for a lot. I'm just asking for a few months so I can do one thing at a time. And actually, secondly, and I would like to say also that the compensation review would be completed too and presented. So I have a good understanding of that also.
CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my only comment would be, Mr. Mayor, is that I'm in council's hands, but I will reiterate that council did put $1.8 million in surplus from 2020 into a reserve that has yet to be utilized for anything. So it could be used towards assisting with smoothing of any potential future tax increases. Again, staff have, I believe, answered all of council's questions since April of last year or this year regarding this org review. You asked for the financial implications. We've given you the financial implications. We feel that this is the best route forward. We are asking for one increase in the complement to move this organization forward. Further to Director Radigan's comments on the recommendation 8, the activity worksheets will be coming to council. You'll have them in advance of making a final decision on the program changes. So you will have ultimate say as to which positions, if any, are approved through the 2022 budget, and you'll have the activity worksheets to support that. So, Mr. Mayor, at this point in time, again, from a staff perspective or from my perspective, I think staff are still in a position that we'd like to have a decision on this tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Ma Chapman.
Alan, just through to CEO, what's the impact if we put it off till the new year?
CAO.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Ma Chapman. Again, it just delays us in moving forward with the corporate reorg, and the savings will be there. You'll see savings through likely the 2021 financial statements. We haven't finalized those, but we do know that there's gapping money probably much more than $156,000, but I won't know that until the final tally, which will likely come in April of next year. But again, we have been discussing this since we were here October 7th of 2020, and we presented these recommendations, and they were deferred till after the 2021 budget. And here we are again, almost a year later, and we're deferring it again. So again, I seek council's indulgence to either make a decision to proceed or not to proceed.
I see different cards, Councillor Cabral, and then Deputy Mayor Coughlin, I believe. Oh, did Councillor Ritchie, did you have a card up? Let's hear from him first.
But
We haven't heard.
I'm listening with all the views, but I support the reorganization, but not knowing what the increase is going to be, like, I mean, general manager, more responsibilities means more money. Well, how much? Like, I support it, but I just think it's a little premature at this time. Like, I mean, we could come back and deal with this in December after we've got the budget nailed down, or bring this forward during the budget so we can just discuss it further. So, like, we know now what the footprint is as to where you want to go. Okay, that's fine. Let's just set it aside for now until we get through the budget and see where we are with money, and go from there. Like, I mean, if it isn't going to take shape until January, like, I mean, we've got time here to further deal with the budget. And to say that there's a surplus, I find that, well, you know what? Like, I mean, the last time we went with a 0% increase, and then after we went with the 0% increase, and I thank councillors for coming and bringing that in, that there was an outcry from others saying that we should have done it. And yet a month later, there was a report saying, well, we have a surplus. Who's to say this year we'll have another surplus? So, like, it's nice to see the surpluses, but I also like to see this set aside, because I think it's a little premature. So I can't support it tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. And I have to admit that it's not necessarily the changes. I can't support the organizational chart with holes in it for proposed positions. So I wouldn't be able to support it as it currently stands with those positions in there. Those positions need to come before council on an individual basis with the background information and the justification for them. One of the problems that I've had being a councillor, and yes, I still consider myself a brand new councillor, is that when it came time for budget, the data that for me would have been required in many cases to justify approving or voting for a program change and a hiring was lacking. And that's also come back out as a result of the consultant's report too. Like these case studies, if you've got the T's crossed, the I's dotted, the numbers make sense, it's pretty easy to convince someone that that's where you need to go. I think from my standpoint too, that I can't support it today. It's not to say that I won't support it, but I can't support it today. And the reason for that is simply because I cannot make an informed decision based on the things that CAO Schmidt has given us that he does know. I can't base my decision today on the things that we don't know. And that's why, unfortunately, I can't support it today. I think Councillor Muir's point about bringing it back in its current form, although I'll still struggle with the holes unless we can fill some of those come budget time. And the only other comment I want to make is when we talk about $1.8 million that we've saved, we got some money tucked away. Trust me, there's infrastructure out there that we could spend some of that money on. Kind of bring us up to speed. There's still roads out there that need attention and, maybe aren't getting what they should get. So I just wanted to say, but I must admit, I do not have a huge problem with the executive assistant to the CAO's office. I think over the course of the last couple of years, he's taken on a huge role. He could use help, and that person could also help initially help other departments probably as well. So that's where I
So
sit.
Councillor Cabral, what is it that you don't know that you need to know about this proposed org structure?
Service delivery review, what the anticipated differences in pay grades are going to be between the positions that are currently identified in the organization, what the overall costs are going to be after the comprehensive compensation review when they're applied to those positions, because we did remove 5 directors, if I understand it correctly, and we're giving, okay, you got 5 directors all making $100,000. Now we have 3 general managers with more responsibilities who are going to obviously, and well-deserved, I guess, because they're going to have more responsibility, looking after more areas under their jurisdiction. But 2 things happen then. One person's looking after more, whereas before we had one person looking after slightly less. So I think something could be said looking at it from both sides of the coin. But what it may do down the road after the comprehensive compensation review is it will take, instead of the snapshot today, it'll be a snapshot on that organizational chart. And I'm simply not prepared to move forward with it, Mayor Allen, for those reasons. If I knew the answers to those reasons, maybe I could.
So do you, I believe in your numbers, it showed what the increase for the directors to general managers was going to cost, did it not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it did. It's approximately, it's less than $5,000 per GM. So you have three GMs, it's less than $15,000.
Yeah. Just a quick follow on, Mayor Allen, based on that $5,000, I can't help but point out, and no offense, and I hope none is taken, CAO Schmidt, that's what your estimate is going to be, but it will be an outside agency that is doing the comprehensive compensation package review, and their number may be drastically different from what we've got. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the problem I have.
CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to maybe clarify that point. So a GM, yes, would typically make a little bit more than a director. However, through the comp review, the intent is not to essentially, if a director is in, so if you understand our pay grid, we have a pay grid, we have a number of levels, and along each level we have steps. We have step 1 to 5. So if a director is at step 5 today in our current structure, it does not mean that in the new corporate or in the new compensation review that they will remain at step 5. The intent is that if there is a bump up, they could be going to a step 1 or a step 2 on the new pay grid. And it wouldn't be essentially that they're going to step 5 on the new comp review automatically. They wouldn't be going just right directly to the job rate. There's going to be a phasing of those increases over 3, 4, 5 years. And that'll be discussed once that comp review comes forward. So it's not an ultimate, you know, if a GM is, I don't know, let's put numbers out there. If a GM is making $150,000 and today the director is making $130,000, it's not a $20,000 impact immediately in 2022 for that position. It'll be a slight bump up in 2022 and will be phased in over the next 4 to 5 years.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you, Marilyn. My question, I guess, is more of a procedural question with regards to corporate restructure and lame duck. If we don't make this change during this budget, do we still have the authority to do so during the next budget as we would be in lame duck?
Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through you. So the next budget will be the responsibility of the next term of council. Lame duck comes into play approximately August 18th of next year. should we meet the requirements of not enough members of council running for the same positions. And the only restrictions on that regarding HR matters is that council cannot, if they are in lame duck, cannot hire or fire officers of the corporation. So the clerk, the treasurer, building official, CAO, and that's only until either election day or the new term of office begins on November 15th. So it would not affect council's decision-making process regarding an organizational structure.
Thank you.
Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, Mayor. As I said earlier, I think this is a consistent structural organization, as many municipalities or other agencies would have. I have no problem with the structure as has been presented. My issue, as I mentioned earlier, is with not having all the information that I think we should have, and that is the results of the service delivery. We put a lot of time and money into that. We haven't got the final report yet. I applaud those on council who are doing due diligence and asking for more information before we make a final decision rather than making it here tonight. I would also suggest that staff have done a good job on this, no problem with that. And if it would help the CAO, I would even support going forward with the executive assistant tonight so they can start recruiting for the position. However, to approve this entire restructuring without having all the information that I believe we have a responsibility to have, to do our due diligence, to have the service delivery and make a final decision on it, we need to make sure we have all those things first. And I think it would be difficult for me to support it tonight without having that information, but I do like the organizational chart as has been presented.
CEO Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just trying to take in the comments, Mr. Mayor. Hearing the comments from council, I can understand the hesitancy there. I guess I could propose that there was some comments there about the EA position. Would council be amenable to moving forward with the corporate structure as is, receiving it and coming back in after the budget, so January of 2022, to finalize the corporate structure? I guess to what I'm hearing is would they be more supportive if the two other positions that we presented here tonight went through the normal budget process? So I'm referring to the facility supervisor and the part-time administrative assistant position. If those two positions were removed from the current structure as you see it and went through the process of being evaluated through the 2022 budget deliberations, would council be more amenable to that?
And so removal of those, and then what with respect to this proposed structure, CEO Schmidt?
So the structure itself would remain as is. The council would receive it, and we would come back in January of 2022 with the intent of having it approved and move forward, subject to council's consideration of anything coming from the service delivery review.
Let me just try to repeat that back. What I'm hearing you're suggesting is that receive this organizational structure, go ahead with the executive assistant hire, and make approval of this structure in after the budget, the beginning of the new year, and make the admin assistant, infrastructure and operational services, and the facility supervisor a budget item. Is that what you're saying?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Essentially, that's what I'm saying. I don't really see, to be quite honest with you, any changes in this corporate structure, even with what's to come, to be quite honest with you. There are going to be the service delivery review is going to look at key performance measures. It's going to look at service levels. But to be quite honest with you, I don't see it changing this corporate structure by any means. It will or potentially could have an impact on the positions that are being requested in for 2022, but I really don't see it having any major changes in the corporate structure itself. So again, with that in mind, if council's agreeable to not changing the corporate structure and revisiting it or coming forward in January to finalize it, once you've had some of that further information from the service delivery review. And again, those two other positions, as you mentioned, further information could be provided through the 2022 budget. But the EA position we could move forward on immediately and have that added to our structure.
Councillor Cabral and Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I'm okay receiving it. I just wanted to comment, though, that when this other information does come forth, I would ask that staff take that into consideration and review the organizational structure that's being proposed in case it could use some tweaking. And I think we might find that there is some information forthcoming that might support that. If I heard Councillor Hanna correctly, to basically, and it's not on the recommendation to take these folks on, but I got the impression that the executive assistant to the CAO's office was something that he was in support of so that they could recruit for it now. I would be amicable to doing that now as well, because I don't think we need, over the course of the last 2 years, to have a lot of supporting data that our CAO has been pulled and twisted and gone to a lot of great lengths to cover off a lot of other areas that he could use the assistance. And I think it would be something that might be beneficial to other staff. But as far as the facilities person is concerned, I think that still needs to come before council at budget time as a regular program change, and with the supporting documentation that comes with it, would enable at least me to make an informed decision on whether or not I support it.
Okay, before going to Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Clerk Ainsworth, I would like to have a vote on the motion as it's stated, and it sounds through discussion with council that there needs to be another motion to incorporate what we've been talking about with respect to this organizational structure, the executive assistant, and the other two green positions. So can you be considering how we can accomplish that while I go to Deputy Mayor Coughlin, please? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. That was actually my point, is that I would fully support Councillor Hanna and Cabral's statements, and that we should add an amendment. I would put forward an amendment to have it at the end of this motion that be received, and that we move forward with the hiring of that position so that it's firm tonight and we can continue to have everything else brought forward during the regular budget process. But yeah, we can move forward with that new position.
Okay. But as I stated, Clerk Ainsworth, I'd like this motion somehow to be voted on in a recorded fashion, and then have another motion. Did you have a follow-up, Mayor Coughlin?
So what the motion before us right now, the resolution before us, simply just state to be received, next paragraph, and then just put the title in, move forward with the hiring of said position. So that it's one motion. We all get, I think that hearing council today, I think that's a great way for us all to move forward. We get further information during budget. Staff can move forward with the hiring of this, because I do believe that it's going to alleviate a lot of added pressure on multiple departments. And I think that that's a great first step in moving towards the reorg, to make sure that we all feel very sound and that we are all making informed decisions moving forward.
Well, but there are some councillors that agree with or are willing to vote for this organizational structure.
Just as a point, Mayor Allen, if this goes forward, I will be voting against both motions.
Okay, that's fine. Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So for procedure wise, the main motion that's on the floor currently is to receive the report, for the CAO to be authorized to implement the new corporate structure, and for a bylaw to come forward later on this meeting for council to authorize the corporate structure. While some members would like to have a vote on that motion specifically, the proper process would be if some members of council would like to see a deferral until after the 2022 budget and an approval of the executive assistant position, then they would have to propose a motion. The motion would be to, my recommendation would be to amend the second paragraph to remove the words effective January 1st, 2022, as well as authorizing the CAO to implement the new corporate structure. It would be to defer the corporate structure to after the 2022 budget, and then removing the third paragraph, which requests that the bylaw be brought forward later on in the meeting, and changing that to council approving the hiring of the executive assistant to the CAO, mayor, and council. So that amendment, if it is presented, would go to a vote. If it is successful, it would amend the main motion. If it is not successful, then the main motion as we see on the agenda would then be back on the table for a vote.
Okay, Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the clerk has captured basically what CO Schmidt suggested, and I believe that would be what I would certainly support.
Okay, Clerk Ainsworth, can you post it up on the screen then, what you just described?
Thank you. Just one moment. I am going to work with the deputy clerk to draft that amendment. One moment.
Councillor Coughlin, or Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Marilyn. With the deferral, my question would just be then, when would council next deliberate this, and which more additional information would be provided to us? Typically with a deferral, we have the same conversation next. With a referral, we are asking for specific information, and I think that's to the benefit of council to have specific information requested so that the next conversation, we can have a more wholesome discussion again.
I'm not sure who could answer that question. CAO, do you have thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my understanding, I stand to be corrected, that the service delivery review was the timeline for the report, if you will. My understanding is the end of January or end of February of 2022. So if that's what council is looking for, then I would suggest that we'd be looking at coming to council shortly thereafter that report comes forward.
Follow on.
Thank you, Marilyn. And I do understand that we spoke about reserves or surpluses earlier. So then during this budget process, would we be allocating funds? My comment or my question would then be, in January or February, when we have this conversation about implementing a corporate reorg, should council support it, it's important that we have the money, the funds in order to do so. So how would we prepare ourselves for that?
Well, through we know what the reserves are presently. We won't have the financial results for this fiscal year by that point in time yet, but we will have a budget that we've reviewed and approved. So that will have financial information that will be available to us to be able to use in assessing, what our position is at that time. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Back to the question about what documentation we would need come January or February when we look at the organization chart once again. So what I would like to have, so you can note that, is I need the full comprehensive compensation review, which I think I'll have. I'll have the budget clearly done. I'll have the service delivery review complete. And that I'm hoping would include the IT master plan, because I also think that that could have staffing implications. So if I could have that information, I would happily look at the organizational chart.
Okay. Who had their card up? Councillor Hannah?
Thank you. Just for clarification on the Deputy Mayor's question about the finance, my understanding, of course, from the CO's report is we do have the surplus to cover the changes to the organizational chart. We're just removing the 2 new hires for the facilities and so on, and putting them into the budget negotiations as a report to justify hiring them. But the rest of it, I believe, is already covered by the surplus. So going forward, I think the only impact would be what happens during the budget process with those other positions. So I think that everything else would be falling into place, and we will have done our due diligence and going forward with the organizational chart, if it is approved the way it is, without any changes that may be suggested during the service delivery review.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you, Marilyn. And I guess the intent of my comment was to provide clarification to myself, because when I'm listening to Councillor Moore, the suggestion is to have the discussion after budget. And when I'm listening to Councillor Hannah, I'm hearing to have this further discussion as part of budget. So I just want to make sure that when we are deferring this, we know when we're deferring this to.
Yeah. Well, Clerk Ainsworth, do we have some proposed wording?
Hi, Mayor Allen. I can share my screen now and show you what we have.
Thank you.
One second. Okay. So here's the amendment before you.
Yeah, the challenge is that if some councillors want to approve the corporate structure as presented and not defer it, but agree with the final paragraph, then how does that work? Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Allen. The main motion, the original motion, would encompass that hiring through the approval of the bylaw that's later on in the meeting. So if council would like to approve the corporate structure as presented, along with the hiring of the EA position, they would vote against this amendment and then vote in favor of the main motion. If a member of council would like to see the corporate structure deferred to after the 2022 budget, not approve the organizational structure this evening and go ahead with the EA position as of now, they would vote in favor of the proposed amendment.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you, Marilyn. I would like to move the amendment that's before us. And while I do support the corporate reg as it's presented, I also do value that there are members of council, including there is additional information that I would like as well. I think that this is simply pushing it to a month from now. There'll be more information to come at that time. It doesn't shelve the organization structure. It's still alive. It's still moving forward. And I think that this gets the executive assistant position moving forward as well. So while I would vote in favor of the first, I think that this amendment is more palatable to council, and I would like to move asking for a seconder for the amendment.
I'll second it.
Councillor Hannah, I just, to your earlier point, and we need clarification, you said this just moves it a month. There have been different timeframes. It's been January, February 2022, and now you're referring to a month from now, which is November 2021. So we need a realistic timeframe of when and how this is coming back.
The amendment before us, Mayor Allen, through you, the amendment before us does say the 2022 budget process, and we do have in our calendars now budget meetings for next month. So I think that that does provide time for staff to address council's concerns, but keeps it on the table, and we can move forward with the executive assistant. So I think that this amendment is palatable to the majority of council. So again, asking.
Yes, but the service delivery review and the compensation review information won't be available in a month from now. Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I just wanted to say similar, that we're looking toward the end of January to have the service delivery review, even early February to be complete.
So we need to be clear in this, when it's coming back and what information we'll have at that point in time. CAO Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I look at the proposed budget meeting schedule, we're looking at having a final 2022 budget approved by the middle of December. With that in mind, and with holidays quickly approaching after that, I don't see anything coming forward to council until at the earliest January, February of next year.
Yep. Councillor Hannah?
Thank you. I just, considering maybe it's important, I just see if February's been added in there, but I just wanted to make sure, as Councilor Moore pointed out, that we do need to see the service delivery review completed before we give this final approval. In my view, to do it otherwise would not be doing our due diligence.
I would suggest, Clerk Ainsworth, that what you just added there, it's kind of confusing, because after the budget process, as we just said, ends in December, and then we're talking February 20. So we need some wording in there to clarify. Would by February 2022 give flexibility to and then take out be deferred to take out after the 2022 budget process, because it's really not related to that coming back.
Sorry to interrupt, Mayor Allen, but the way it's worded now, it has to come to us in January.
By February 2022 is you've
Is it
got 28
inclusive
days.
then?
Pardon me? It's inclusive of
make it in-
February.
Okay, fair
Yes.
enough.
Delete the third paragraph of the bylaw. Okay, so we have a mover and seconder. Any other suggestions with respect to this wording?
Could I just, sorry, Mayor Allen, to interrupt. Could I just ask that the third paragraph be read out, please?
Sure. So when it says delete the third paragraph, it was referencing this paragraph here, that a bylaw authorizing the new corporate organizational structure be presented for consideration at the October 6th special meeting of council. So tonight we would delete that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So as was explained by Clerk Ainsworth, if you're in favor of the org structure going ahead at the October 6th, 21 meeting tonight, you would vote against this amendment. and then catch up on, there'd be another vote in the bylaws with respect to the executive assistant aspect. Everybody clear on that? Okay, we have a mover and seconder for that. Do we, Deputy Clerk?
We just need a seconder for that.
Councillor Mon Chapman. And I request a court recorded vote, please.
Just gonna stop sharing for a second here.
Councillor Ritchie, did you have a comment?
We're voting on the amendment.
We're voting on what was just in front of the motion as amended, yes. That was just on the screen.
Yes, I've seen that, yes.
Okay, so Mayor Allen has asked for a recorded vote. And that is for the amendment. So I'll just read it again for everyone's clarification, that the motion now before council be amended as follows. Amend the second paragraph to read that the new corporate structure as presented in Appendix A be brought back to council by February 2022. To delete that third paragraph where it is bringing the bylaw forward tonight, and to add that council authorize the hiring of an executive assistant to the CAO, mayor, and council. So when I call your name, please state yes or no.
Deputy Clerk, can you put it
Yes.
up on the screen again, please, the wording?
Sure. Everyone see my screen? Okay.
Everybody clear on this then? No further questions? Okay, proceed, please.
Okay. So Councillor Cabral,
Yes.
Councillor Ritchie,
Yes.
Councillor Ma Chapman,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Hannah,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin,
Yes.
and Mayor Allen.
No,
Okay, and that motion is carried.
okay, thank you. Okay. So moving on to 4.1 bylaws. How is that
Marilyn, I believe we need
the
to vote on
bylaw?
that.
Yes, yes, Mayor
Pardon?
Allen will just need to vote on the main motion as amended now. I
Okay.
can read that if you'd like. So that the report from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding service delivery review recommendations 8 and 9 dated October 6th, 2021 be received. And that the new corporate structure as presented in Appendix A be brought back to council by February 2022. And that council authorize the hiring of an executive assistant to the CAO, mayor, and council.
No, so we still have, we have a mover and seconder for that?
I can move it.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Hannah. Now, before we vote on that, I just want to clarify when we get to the bylaws then, as Clerk Ainsworth was mentioning, that will change, will it?
Correct. So once we get to the bylaw section, we will just withdraw that motion to authorize the bylaw at this time, and it will just come back when this comes back to.
So
Sorry.
I thought though that at the bylaw stage, if a counselor was in agreement with the executive assistant, that would come out at the bylaw stage. Clerk Ainsworth?
Through you, Mayor Allen. No, if the bylaw that's on the agenda this evening would be to approve the organizational structure as it was originally presented. As the executive assistant is included in the motion that will be voted on in a few moments, there's no need for a bylaw. So we would, as the deputy clerk had mentioned, we would withdraw the motion for the bylaw, and simply council would not table it, not vote on it, and move forward to the confirmatory bylaw.
Okay. All right.
So you have your mover and
All
seconder.
those in favor of the, we have a mover and seconder. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Oops, sorry. That is carried. Okay, so we're moving on to the confirmatory. Correct? Can I have a mover and seconder for that, please? Councillor Moore, Councillor Cabral, that bylaw 2021-93 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the special meeting held on October 6th, listed herein, be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? And adjournment, mover and seconder, please. Councillor Moore, Councillor Ritchie, that the special meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 5:51 p.m. to meet again in a regular meeting on October 6, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? That is carried. Is a link, a separate link for the 6:30 meeting?
It's the same Zoom link. So
Same Zoom link.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You.
See you shortly.